thinking about.
Absolutely. With the TED Talk, it was kind of your chance to respond to a lot of critics, and you sort of seemed to win a hell of a lot of people back and people that had never even heard of you. How did you feel when you got off stage after your TED Talk, and did you just feel like, yep, I nailed it?
Yeah, I was pretty relieved because that talk ate my life for like a month, and it was so hard to keep it all in my brain because it pretty much was like delivering a 13-minute monologue because it was a performance, and which doesn't mean it wasn't authentic, but I memorized that talk and I rehearsed it and rehearsed it and rehearsed it and, you know, needed to have it all kind of stuck in my head. So getting off stage, I was like, oh, I get my brain back. I can think about other shit finally. But yeah, I was very proud of the way it went and the response too. The most incredible thing about the TED Talk, which it's hard to describe, but TED is, you know, you may have like seen TED on the internet, but it's an event attended by 2,000 people, and those 2,000 people are like, it's like Atlas Shrugged. They're like all the crazy, rich, powerful people, because you have to be loaded to afford a ticket to TED, which is weird in itself. But it was really strange walking through the halls of TED and having all these like rich, powerful adults. I was like, I feel very weird here. I'm a musician. I'm not, you know, I don't really feel like a grown-up. But because I had, you know, because I was speaking business language, all of a sudden I was like accepted into this weird adult fold, and that was actually like the creepiest thing about it. But also really like kind of empowering in a weird way to just go like, oh, if you talk to adults about money, they'll listen. Whereas if you try and talk to them about music or art, they'll just kind of nod off.
Yeah.
So.
It seemed to, as soon as the $1.2 million figure came up, Bill Gates and all those kind of people were clapping away and really going, money, money, money. And
yeah, I mean, people pay attention to big numbers. I mean, I did it, to be fair, I did that deliberately. I mean, I chose Kickstarter. I knew that that dollar amount was going to be advertised. I could have chosen a different platform. And I knew people would pay attention. I'm not an idiot. So, you know, but then of course the like inevitable backlash and the inevitable fallout. So it, you know, I think as long as you can keep your perspective that, you know, the amount was actually so fictional. And I've explained this a little bit in my blog, but that $1.2 million vanished, was pretty much already gone the moment the check was cashed, because it cost so much money to manufacture the products for the Kickstarter. And I whimsically chose to give everyone free shipping without really doing any of the math. And you fuckers in Australia and New Zealand, oops. The shipping bill for the Kickstarter was over $300,000. And I was like, oh, God damn, there goes our video budget. Oh, well. But, you know, I learned as I went. I learned a great deal.
When the ship goes down. Social media.
It's good.
Yeah. We've got pretty much the same amount of Twitter followers, neck and neck. Tell me, I'm kidding. Tell me, you get a bit of flack, you cop a bit of flack for retweeting compliments. Now, I can look at this in two ways, and probably everyone here, the same deal. You're bringing your community together by giving this person who pretty much gets out of bed every day, and the first thing they do is listen to, you know, one of your CDs. On the flip side, when someone retweets a compliment, it's basically saying, hey, this person said something really good about me, check me out. How do you sort of, when you see someone else retweet compliments about themselves, what's your first reaction?
Well, I certainly don't. If you look at how I tweet, it's not random at all. It's incredibly calculated. What I share and how I share it. And I do get very impulsive, but I know I'm being impulsive when I'm being impulsive. It's just like the way I make art. It may seem very chaotic, but I'm thinking about the chaos while I'm within it. And I would never just retweet someone saying, I love you, I think you're great. Because to me, it's not, and also if my fans think that that's what's going to get them retweeted, that's just sort of boring behavior and not interesting to anybody. What I will retweet is something of interest. And this is why a Twitter feed is good. And so if I see a pop star, or anyone for that matter, but let's say a pop star just retweeting a pile of random compliments, that's not interesting to me. And I wouldn't think it's very interesting to their fans or their readers. Whereas if someone says something of interest to me and I have something to say back to them, I'll retweet it. You know, or if I just want to send a message, for instance, to a city that I'm in, that something is happening and there's enthusiasm around it, then the tweet might seem a little empty and random, but actually it's got a meaning behind it, which is I want everyone in Perth to know that, that people are already at the venue, even though it's 4 o'clock, and if they come, there's a party going on outside. And the meaning is a little bit deeper than would actually appear to someone who's not paying attention to what's happening on the ground. So I'm very, you know, like I can be very random, it can seem that I'm very random about what I tweet, but I think about it a lot, and I've also been doing it for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And it's great, it's like its own art form.
Absolutely.
And if you have a lot of followers and you've developed a relationship with them and you've gotten really good at tweeting and shortening and getting a message out correctly, it's fun. It's because you realize it's a skill. And, you know, I don't know how much pride one can take in being a good tweeter. But we don't have names for shit like this because the platforms are new. But when you see someone who's really good at it, you know. And someone who's really good at it has that correct balance of including others, not just talking about themselves, being a really good conduit, being a good connector, you know, sharing information that's useful and entertaining or whatever, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I mean, some people are just naturals at it, and then you look at some other people's Twitter feeds, and it's just like boring.
Let's talk about the poem you wrote for the Boston bomber and the reaction, and then an email you received from Bono. So something you feel is incredibly underrated is compassion, and I absolutely agree, and I think everyone in this room would agree with that. All humans deserve empathy. It did seem to me like an attention-grabbing move while families were still grieving that you would write a poem from the Boston bomber's perspective. What was your motivation?
Well, it wasn't a poem from the bomber's perspective, as far as I'm concerned. It was a really slapdash stream of consciousness poem, and I write these occasionally and put them on my blog. And I was in Boston when the bombing happened, and it happened about 15 blocks from my house. I wasn't at home, I was across the river in a cafe, but my life and my head were affected, as everyone in the city was affected. And then things got really weird. I don't know how much of the news of it got over here. But, you know, I had a show in New York a few days later, and Neil and I were gonna take the train down together. I woke up that morning, was told to stay in my house, and this kind of stuff doesn't happen in Boston, Massachusetts. Like, it was very unsettling. And we ignored it. The trains were all stopped. There were no cars on the road. Things were very weird. We escaped. We went to New York. I did my show. We listened to the radio for the full 5-hour drive, just listening to the news, which was probably a bad idea. And it was just all commentary about this kid. And then I spent, a day in New York doing all this stuff, but it was all just at the forefront. And what I do as an artist, and what a lot of artists do, is you pull the ingredients of what's around you and what's in the forefront of your brain, and you mash it up with your own experiences. Everything just becomes ingredients to go into the stew. So I got back to Boston, wrote that poem, which was not so much for him, but it was just a mishmash of the experiences that I had had those few days, and going to New York and feeling weird and feeling scared, and only the few people around me could look at it and see the ingredients that were in there, and my marriage problems being in there, and the party that I was at the other night and meeting, a woman who I talked to about like her decision to have children, and all of these ingredients that went in there that I knew about, no one else knew about. They just sort of read this two-dimensional thing. And I don't regret at all publishing that poem, even though I don't even think it was a great poem. It was my way of working through what was happening. And this is a theme in my life that comes up a lot. Like, anybody, any artist, or any person who needs to work through things in their own way, especially if they're not hurting anybody, I think should definitely be given space to do that. I am seeing this lately with Miley Cyrus. I'm like, just let her do it. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if you like it. Doesn't matter if it's good, bad, trashy, da 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 da. She's clearly like, I recognize an artist trying to figure shit out when I see one, and that's an artist trying to figure shit out. And there has to be an allowance for that. Otherwise, art becomes safe and sanctioned, which it shouldn't be. So, when I knocked off that poem, I didn't expect that I would be having to talk about it like this, but the conversation is necessary, I think.
I love sticking up for Bono. Everyone bags the shit out of him. He's an
Poor
he's an easy target. What did his email say to you?
Hold on, I'm gonna open this water. He just wrote a nice email and just saying, don't let the bastards get you down. And I mean, he also, and a few people around me, sort of took me aside and sort of said, are you thinking about what you're doing? Because we care about your longevity. And he said something to the same effect. He's like, I totally see what you're going through. I recognize what's happening. I have been knocked around, so much, and gone through so many ups and downs, and had so many people yell at me for so many reasons. I've learned when to back off. So clearly, you're going to learn something from this about, what to expect, when you create and put things out. And that is the fear I always have, is that I'll get embroiled in enough controversies and enough people will yell at me that I'll just be like, okay, fine, I'll just stop saying shit. And how fucking awful would that be?
Shit. It's like Nick Cave said, I think the other day via Skype, he says, being Nick Cave is incredible, and he's become this incredible artist, but at the same time, it can be fucking exhausting being Nick Cave.
Yeah, I saw him speak at South by Southwest this past year, and he was great. And he's so, he's so conscious of his own persona, but in a way that doesn't seem at all put on. He just knows, I was amazed to hear him talking about his own insecurities so much. I thought that was fantastic, and he said so many things that resonated with me about how, how he desperately wants everyone to think Nick Cave is cool, and we're like, well, we think you're cool. You're Nick Cave. But to see an artist being able to just sit there and be honest about it is really refreshing.